Somewhere in the world, there are people with less talent than you, less intelligence than you, and fewer opportunities than you, yet they are respected, listened to, and quietly influential. Not because they speak more, not because they post more, not because they demand attention, but because they understand something most people never realize until it's too late. Power does not chase. Power attracts. And the moment you start chasing attention, something invisible breaks. Your words lose weight. Your presence loses gravity. And without noticing it, you begin performing instead of leading. Look around. The loudest voices are everywhere. Opinions shouted. Achievements announced. Validation hunted like oxygen. Everyone is competing to be seen, to be heard, to matter. And yet, the people who actually shape outcomes, who move rooms without raising their voice, who influence without explanation, they are rarely the ones fighting for attention. This video is about that difference. It's about why powerful people never chase attention, why they don't need to announce themselves, and why the more you try to be noticed, the less authority you often have. This isn't motivational content. It's not advice meant to hype you up for a few minutes. This is about understanding a psychological law that quietly governs respect, attraction, and influence in every social system work, relationships, leadership, and life itself. If you've ever felt exhausted trying to prove yourself, if you've ever wondered why quieter people are often taken more seriously, if you've ever sensed that the more you explain, the less people listen, then this video is for you. But this only works if you listen differently. So here's the immediate request. Don't treat this like background noise. Don't scroll. Don't multitask. Stay present. Because what you're about to hear isn't something you apply by doing more. It is something you apply by stopping certain behaviors you didn't even realize were costing you power. If this way of thinking resonates, subscribe not as a public declaration, not as hype, but as a quiet alignment with a deeper understanding of how power actually works. Stay until the end, because the final chapter will tie everything together in a way that changes how you see attention, silence, and your own presence. Now let's get clear on the core idea. Attention is not power. Attention is currency. And like any currency, the more desperately you chase it, the cheaper it becomes. Powerful people understand this instinctively. They know that attention sought is attention devalued. That needing to be seen signals dependence. And dependence, psychologically, never commands respect. It invites control, judgment, and dismissal. The need to be noticed doesn't come from confidence. It comes from uncertainty, from the fear of being irrelevant, from the belief that if you're not visible, you don't exist. And modern culture feeds that fear constantly: likes, views, notifications, metrics. All of it trains the mind to equate visibility with value. But power plays a different game. Power is rooted in self-containment, in emotional independence, in the ability to remain steady without applause. And the people who have mastered this never rush toward the spotlight because they know something crucial. The spotlight follows what doesn't need it. In the next chapter, we'll break down the psychology behind attention chasing, why the brain craves it, how it weakens perceived authority, and why resisting that urge immediately shifts how people see and treat you. Stay with this, because once you see this pattern clearly, you can't unsee it. The desire for attention feels natural. In fact, it feels necessary. From an early age, the human brain learns a simple equation. Attention equals safety. As children, attention meant care, protection, and survival. Being seen meant being fed, heard, and responded to. Being ignored felt dangerous. That wiring never fully disappears. It matures, but it doesn't vanish. And if you don't understand it, it quietly controls you. This is where the problem begins. In adult life, attention is no longer about survival, but the brain still treats it that way. Praise, recognition, validation, likes, approval, acknowledgement. These things trigger the same neural reward systems that once ensured we stayed connected to caregivers and tribes. Dopamine is released. The body relaxes. The mind feels momentarily secure. And slowly, without noticing, attention becomes emotional oxygen. The moment attention becomes emotional oxygen, power begins to slip away. Because power is not built on being reacted to. Power is built on being stable without reaction. When you chase attention, you are unconsciously signaling dependence. Not verbally, not intentionally, but psychologically. And humans are extremely sensitive to these signals. Long before logic kicks in, the nervous system of others is already deciding how to categorize you. Leader or follower, authority or participant, grounded or seeking. Attention-seeking places you in the category of the seeker. And seekers are rarely followed. Think about it carefully. The person constantly talking, constantly posting, constantly explaining, constantly proving. They are working hard to control perception. But real authority doesn't work that way. Authority doesn't attempt to manage impressions. It allows impressions to form. This is why attention chasing often backfires. The more you try to be noticed, the more you invite evaluation. When you step forward aggressively asking to be seen, others instinctively step back and assess you. They look for flaws. They look for inconsistencies. They look for reasons to downgrade you. Not out of malice, but because that's how social hierarchies naturally function. Power, on the other hand, reverses this dynamic. When you don't chase attention, people begin to watch you instead. Curiosity replaces judgment. Observation replaces evaluation. The question shifts from, do I like this person? To, why don't they need approval? And that question alone elevates status. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in human psychology. Attention flows towards self-contained energy. People are drawn to those who appear internally complete. Those who don't rush to speak. Those who don't scramble to be liked. Those who don't explain themselves unnecessarily. These individuals feel solid, predictable in the right way, calm, and calmness signals safety at a higher level. The brain trusts what feels steady. Now consider the opposite. Attention chasing creates emotional volatility. One moment you feel confident because you're being seen. The next moment you feel anxious because attention fades. This creates a cycle of emotional dependency. You become reactive. You start adjusting yourself to regain visibility. Your tone changes. Your behavior shifts. Your message softens or exaggerates. And unconsciously, people sense the instability. Instability does not command respect. It invites control. This is why the people who chase attention often feel exhausted. They are constantly monitoring reactions, constantly reading feedback, constantly recalibrating their identity based on response. This drains mental energy and fractures self-trust. You stop acting from conviction and start acting from anticipation. Powerful people avoid this trap by refusing to outsource their sense of worth. They don't measure themselves by reaction. They measure themselves by alignment, by whether their actions match their internal standards. And because of that, they move slower, speak less, choose carefully. They understand that attention gained cheaply is attention lost quickly. There's another layer to this. Chasing attention also compresses your identity. You start becoming a simplified version of yourself, so others can quickly understand you. You exaggerate certain traits. You repeat familiar opinions. You perform. Over time, depth is sacrificed for clarity. Complexity is sacrificed for palatability. And what remains is a surface-level version of you that can be easily consumed, but not deeply respected. Power requires depth. Depth requires silence. Silence gives space for complexity, for ambiguity, for mystery. And mystery is not manipulation, it's psychological gravity. When people cannot fully predict you, they stay alert. They pay attention. They listen more carefully. Not because you demand it, but because the mind naturally focuses on what isn't fully revealed. Attention chasers reveal everything immediately. Powerful people reveal selectively. This is why restraint is so often misinterpreted as confidence. It's not arrogance. It's not aloofness. It's emotional regulation. It has the ability to sit with the discomfort of not being immediately acknowledged and not collapse into noise. That ability alone separates leaders from performers. Another uncomfortable truth: attention chasing often masks a fear of insignificance. Not insignificance in reality, but insignificance in perception. The fear of being overlooked, forgotten, ignored, and modern culture amplifies this fear relentlessly. Algorithms reward frequency over substance, visibility over depth, reaction over reflection. But power has never belonged to those who move with the crowd. Power belongs to those who can stand slightly apart without panicking. This is why powerful people don't rush to comment on everything. They don't react to every provocation. They don't insert themselves into every conversation. They choose moments. And by choosing moments, they create weight. When they speak, it lands heavier because it's rare. When they act, it feels intentional because it's not constant. Scarcity increases value. This is not a marketing trick. It's a psychological law. And powerful people apply it instinctively to their presence. The paradox is this: when you stop chasing attention, attention begins to chase you. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that listens. The kind that watches. The kind that waits. But this only works if your silence is rooted in self-respect, not avoidance. Silence used to hide fear feels hollow. Silence used as choice feels strong. The difference is internal, and people feel it immediately. In this chapter, the key realization is simple but uncomfortable. The need to be noticed is the fastest way to lose authority. Not because attention itself is bad, but because needing it is costly. When you no longer need to be seen, you become harder to ignore. In the next chapter, we'll explore where this need comes from on a deeper level, how ego, validation, and identity get tangled together, and why powerful people build their sense of self somewhere attention cannot reach. Stay with this, because the shift from chasing attention to embodying presence is not loud, but it is irreversible once understood. If attention is the currency, validation is the addiction. Most people don't actually crave attention for its own sake. What they crave is what attention promises. Confirmation that they matter, that they're right, that they're enough. Validation feels like proof of existence. And once the ego links validation to identity, a silent trap is formed. This is where chasing attention becomes dangerous, not socially, but psychologically. The ego is not your confidence. It's your defense system. It forms early when the mind learns to protect itself from rejection, shame, and uncertainty. At first, it's useful. It helps you survive emotionally. But if left unchecked, it begins to rule you. And its primary fuel is external validation. Every compliment reinforces it. Every like feeds it. Every agreement strengthens it. And every absence of validation threatens it. This is why people who rely on attention are never at peace. Their sense of self is outsourced. It lives in the reactions of others. When approval is present, they feel solid. When it disappears, anxiety rushes in. Not because something is wrong, but because the ego believes it's being erased. Powerful people understand something most never see. The ego grows louder the more fragile it is. The need to be seen. The need to be acknowledged. The need to be right. The need to be admired. These are not signs of confidence. They are signs of identity instability. When someone constantly seeks validation, they are unconsciously asking the world to hold them together. And the world is not designed to do that. It is inconsistent, distracted, and indifferent, which means the ego is always on edge, scanning for reassurance, interpreting silence as rejection. This creates reactivity. Reactive people speak too fast. They over-explain. They justify unprompted. They defend against imagined attacks. They chase clarity when no confusion exists. All of this comes from one place: the fear that without validation, the self collapses. Powerful people break this cycle by relocating identity inward. They do not ask, "How am I being perceived?" They ask, "Am I aligned with myself?" This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. When identity is rooted internally, validation becomes optional, pleasant but unnecessary, useful but not required. And when validation is no longer required, behavior changes naturally. You stop performing. You stop managing impressions. You stop shaping yourself to fit expectations you didn't choose. This is why powerful people appear authentic without trying. They are not authentic because they are brave. They are authentic because they are no longer negotiating their identity in public. Ego-driven individuals negotiate constantly. They soften opinions to avoid rejection. They exaggerate achievements to secure admiration. They hide uncertainty to maintain authority. And paradoxically, this constant negotiation erodes trust. Because people sense incongruence. They feel the adjustment. They notice the performance. Even if they can't articulate it, their nervous system registers something unstable. Stability commands respect. Performance invites scrutiny. Another uncomfortable truth: validation seeking narrows your thinking. When your mind is focused on being approved of, it avoids risk. It avoids unpopular truths. It avoids complexity. It prefers safe opinions, predictable behavior, and familiar narratives, not because they are true, but because they are rewarded. This is why attention-driven environments produce shallow conversations and recycled ideas. Powerful thinkers are willing to be misunderstood. Ego-driven thinkers are desperate to be agreed with. Misunderstanding is uncomfortable, but it's not fatal. Ego tells you it is. Ego tells you that being unseen, unliked, or disagreed with is dangerous. But once you sit with that discomfort and survive it, something important happens. The ego loses leverage. Silence becomes easier. Disagreement becomes tolerable. Criticism loses its sting. And when criticism no longer controls you, neither does attention. This is where real authority begins to form. Authority is not about dominance. It's about self-trust. The ability to stand by your perspective without external reinforcement. The ability to let others disagree without collapsing or attacking. The ability to remain grounded even when validation is absent. Powerful people don't silence others. They silence the need to be validated by them. This doesn't mean they don't care. It means they care selectively. They value feedback, but they don't depend on it. They listen without obeying. They consider without surrendering. This balance is rare, and rarity creates gravity. There's another layer to the ego trap: identity inflation. When attention validates you, the ego expands. You begin to identify with the role you're praised for. The smart one, the strong one, the leader, the rebel, the helper. And once identity fuses with a role, you become trapped inside it. You must now perform that role continuously or risk losing validation. This is exhausting. Powerful people resist this trap by refusing to over-identify. They remain flexible. They allow themselves to be wrong, to change, to evolve, to disappoint, because their identity is not a performance. It's a foundation. Foundations don't need applause. This is why powerful individuals often feel calmer under pressure. Pressure threatens performance, not identity. And when identity is stable, pressure becomes information instead of danger. Most people never experience this freedom. They are too busy maintaining an image. And here's the final insight of this chapter. The ego cannot be satisfied. No amount of attention is enough. No level of validation is permanent. There is always a higher bar, a new comparison, a louder voice, which means chasing attention is a race without a finish line. Powerful people step off the race entirely. They understand that attention is a side effect, not a goal. That validation is feedback, not identity. And that the quiet confidence of self-trust outlasts any momentary applause. In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into how attention chasing affects behavior in social hierarchies, and why those who remain calm, selective, and quiet often rise without ever announcing themselves. This is where quiet power becomes visible. Human behavior is shaped less by logic and more by invisible hierarchies. Every room has one. Every workplace. Every social circle. Even every online space. These hierarchies aren't announced, but everyone feels them. And attention is one of the fastest ways people unknowingly place themselves lower within them. This is where most people misunderstand power. They believe power comes from visibility, from being loud, from being present everywhere, from asserting themselves constantly so they can't be ignored. But in real social dynamics, power comes from selectivity, from restraint, from the ability to disengage without anxiety. People who chase attention are easy to place in a hierarchy. Their motives are transparent. Their emotional needs are visible. And visibility of need is weakness in social systems, not because people are cruel, but because predictability invites control. When others know what you need, they know how to influence you. Attention seekers reveal this constantly. They respond quickly. They react emotionally. They explain themselves eagerly. They fill silence immediately. All of this communicates availability, not strength. Powerful people communicate the opposite without saying a word. They are not always available. They do not respond instantly. They do not rush to clarify. They do not fight for the last word. This creates asymmetry, and asymmetry creates power. In psychology, this is known as non-neediness, not indifference, not coldness, but emotional independence. The ability to be present without seeking something in return. This quality is deeply unsettling to people who operate on attention-based dynamics, because it removes leverage. If someone cannot provoke you, rush you, flatter you, or ignore you into reaction, they lose control. And humans instinctively respect what they cannot easily manipulate. This is why calm people often rise quietly. They don't compete loudly. They don't posture aggressively. They don't dominate conversations. Yet somehow, over time, their presence becomes central. Why? Because they become reference points. When chaos appears, people look to the calm. When decisions stall, people look to the composed. When conflict escalates, people look to the grounded. Not because these individuals demand authority, but because authority is granted to those who stabilize the environment. Attention chasers destabilize environments. They amplify emotion. They escalate drama. They increase noise, and noise weakens structures. Calm strengthens them. This is why powerful people are often underestimated at first. They don't signal ambition loudly. They don't advertise their competence. They don't interrupt to prove intelligence. But as time passes, patterns emerge. Their consistency becomes visible. Their judgment proves reliable. Their words, though fewer, carry weight. Weight is earned through restraint. Another critical dynamic. People respect boundaries they cannot cross. Attention seekers have porous boundaries. They overshare, over-respond, over-engage. This invites intrusion. Opinions are offered freely. Advice is given unsolicited. Criticism comes easily. And slowly, authority erodes. Powerful people are harder to access. Not physically, but emotionally. You don't immediately know what they think. You don't always get a reaction. You don't receive instant validation or resistance. This ambiguity forces others to tread carefully. Carefulness is respect in disguise. This doesn't mean being distant or unkind. It means being contained, knowing what deserves energy and what doesn't, knowing when to engage and when to remain silent. knowing that not every moment requires your presence. Most people burn out trying to stay relevant. Powerful people conserve energy and let relevance come to them. This also explains why powerful individuals are rarely defensive. Defensiveness signals threat. It says, "My position is unstable." When someone feels secure in their standing, they don't argue unnecessarily. They don't explain themselves repeatedly. They don't try to win every disagreement. They allow misunderstandings to exist. This is extremely difficult for attention-driven minds, because misunderstanding feels like loss of control. But in reality, allowing others to misunderstand you is one of the strongest displays of confidence. It says, "I don't need to manage your perception of me." And when you don't manage perception, perception often improves. Another subtle dynamic is temporal power control over timing. Attention seekers operate on urgency. They need immediate feedback, immediate acknowledgement, immediate resolution. Powerful people operate on patience. They let things unfold. They allow silence to do the work. Silence creates pressure. When you don't immediately respond, others fill the gap. They think more. They project. They reflect. This shifts cognitive load away from you and onto them. And whoever controls cognitive load holds power. This is why negotiations favor the calm. Leadership favors the steady. Influence favors the unreactive. It's not dominance, it's nervous system regulation. Powerful people regulate themselves first. And because of that, others unconsciously synchronize to them. Now consider how rare this is. Most people live in reaction. Reaction to messages, reaction to opinions, reaction to trends, reaction to expectations. And reaction strips authority because it places the external world in control. Those who rise are those who respond selectively. They choose when to speak. They choose when to act. They choose when to withdraw. Choice is power. This chapter reveals a truth few accept. You don't climb hierarchies by demanding attention. You rise by becoming indispensable to stability. The calm presence, the measured voice, the consistent behavior. These qualities don't shine immediately. They accumulate. And once accumulated, they are difficult to replace. That is why powerful people don't chase attention. They understand that attention is loud, but influence is quiet. In the final chapter, we'll bring everything together. How to embody this form of quiet power in daily life without becoming cold, distant, or disconnected. How to remain human, warm, and present while refusing to chase validation or visibility. This is where quiet power becomes a way of living, not just a strategy. By now, one truth should feel clear. Powerful people don't avoid attention because they are afraid of it. They avoid chasing attention because they understand its cost. What remains is the most important question. How do you live this way without becoming distant, cold, or disconnected? How do you embody quiet power while staying deeply human? This is where many misunderstand the idea of restraint. Quiet power is not withdrawal from life. It is not emotional shutdown. It is not indifference. In fact, it requires more presence, not less. More awareness, more discipline, more self-honesty, because you are no longer hiding behind noise. When you stop chasing attention, you are left alone with yourself. And that is where real strength is built. Most people stay loud because silence forces confrontation with uncertainty. Silence reveals insecurity. Silence exposes unanswered questions about identity, worth, and direction. Noise covers that discomfort. Attention distracts from it. Validation numbs it. Quiet power does the opposite. It invites discomfort and integrates it. This is why the first step to embodying quiet power is self-anchoring. Self-anchoring means you decide privately what you stand for, not what looks impressive, not what is rewarded, but what is internally consistent. Values, standards, principles. These are not slogans. They are behaviors you follow, even when no one is watching. When you are anchored internally, external reactions lose authority over you. This doesn't mean you ignore feedback. It means feedback becomes information, not identity. You listen without absorbing. You consider without collapsing. You adjust when necessary, but not to earn approval. This is what gives powerful people emotional stability. They are not immune to emotion. They are skilled with it. They feel disappointment without spiraling. They experience criticism without defensiveness. They face rejection without self-betrayal. Because their nervous system is trained to tolerate discomfort instead of escaping it through attention-seeking. Another essential element is intentional presence. Quiet power is not about doing less. It's about doing less randomly. Powerful people are present where it matters. They give full attention when they engage. They listen carefully. They respond thoughtfully. And because they are not scattered everywhere, their presence feels concentrated. This concentration is felt immediately. People feel when someone is fully there, not waiting to speak, not checking reactions, not performing, just present. And presence creates trust faster than charisma ever will. This is why powerful people often say very little, but when they speak, others listen. Their words are not filler. They are not reflex. They come from observation and clarity. And clarity has weight. Another misconception is that quiet power means emotional distance. In reality, it allows for cleaner connection. Attention-chasing relationships are transactional. See me, validate me, respond to me. Quiet power removes this agenda. You connect without extracting. You engage without demanding. And this creates safety for others. People relax around those who don't need anything from them. This is why powerful individuals often become emotional anchors in their environments. Others open up to them, confide in them, seek their perspective. Not because they advertise wisdom, but because their calm invites honesty. Quiet power doesn't dominate relationships. It stabilizes them. There is also a deep freedom in not needing to be understood immediately. When you stop explaining yourself constantly, you allow life to reveal you slowly, through consistency, through action, through time. This kind of understanding is more durable than verbal explanation. Words can be doubted. Behavior cannot. Powerful people let patterns speak. They don't rush to correct every misunderstanding. They trust that alignment over time will clarify what words cannot. And if it doesn't, they accept that not everyone is meant to understand them. This acceptance is crucial, because quiet power requires selective belonging. You cannot embody this way of being and still belong everywhere. Some spaces thrive on noise, urgency, and validation. You will feel out of place there, and that's not a failure. It's a signal. Powerful people choose environments that respect depth, patience, and integrity. And when they find themselves in chaotic spaces, they do not try to fix them with force. They maintain their center. Centering is power. It's the ability to remain yourself, regardless of environment. Another important shift is learning to let go of the need to be right. Attention chasing thrives on winning arguments. Quiet power prioritizes alignment over victory. Powerful people understand that being right publicly often costs more than it's worth. Ego wants acknowledgement. Power wants effectiveness. Sometimes silence is more effective than explanation. Sometimes disengagement is more powerful than dominance. Sometimes walking away preserves more authority than staying to prove a point. This is not weakness. It's strategy grounded in self-respect. Quiet power also transforms ambition. Instead of chasing recognition, you begin to chase mastery. Instead of visibility, you pursue depth. Instead of applause, you seek internal satisfaction. And ironically, this often leads to greater external respect, but that is no longer the goal. The goal becomes coherence. When your thoughts, actions, and values align, confidence stops being something you perform and becomes something you inhabit. This is what people feel when they describe someone as grounded or solid or unshakable. They are not louder. They are clearer. And clarity is magnetic. The final realization is this: quiet power is not something you had, it, something you stop leaking. You stop leaking energy through over-explaining. You stop leaking identity through validation seeking. You stop leaking authority through reactivity. What remains is presence. And presence is power. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means it becomes simpler. Decisions feel cleaner. Relationships feel more honest. Your sense of self becomes less fragile. You no longer chase attention because you are no longer running from yourself. That is the foundation of quiet power. And once built, it does not need to be defended. If something in this video stayed with you, don't rush to explain it to anyone. Let it sit. Let it settle. Real change doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly, in the way you move tomorrow, in the choices you make when no one is watching. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to convince anyone. The people who are meant to feel your presence will feel it without words. If you want to keep building this kind of strength, stay here. Subscribe not for motivation, not for noise, but as a reminder of the standard you're choosing to live by. Then close this video, carry the silence with you, and let your actions speak.